What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the All Yellow Jackets podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Caudell, coming to you. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. Of course, it's been a crazy weekend, and we're going to get into all that. But appreciate anybody listening. Means a lot to me. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. Listening on podcast form, be sure to leave a review. 1 star, 3 star, 5 stars, doesn't matter. Appreciate you coming and hanging out, talking Georgia Tech. So I guess that's the way we'll start. And look, I've had a weekend to think over how I wanted to do this, but man, Saturday was just an abject failure on so many levels. And I mean, Brent Key said as much in his post-game presser on Saturday that it was a failure in every phase of the game, and he is exactly right. This was a conversation I didn't think we would be having after this. You know, I fully expected them to win this game. I picked them to win like 41-10 or 41-7 or something like that. And to be thoroughly outplayed by Bowling Green is not good. I mean, this wasn't one of those fluky upsets where, you know, Georgia Tech outgained Bowling Green by 380 yards, but turned the ball over 4 times, and Bowling Green just capitalized on some key mistakes and got lucky on some plays or something. That they just thoroughly outplayed Georgia Tech, and I can't name a single thing that Georgia Tech did better than Bowling Green. And this is not a good Bowling Green team either. Like, shout out to them for coming and getting the win. They played really well. They were well coached. They played well on offense. They didn't turn the ball over, which is something we'll get to in a minute. They just came in and played good, sound football. But this was a team that was ranked in the 110s to 120s in any advanced analytics systems. They were 1-3 coming into the game. They had a double-digit loss to Liberty. They kept it close against Michigan, but I think Michigan, they kept it closer than Bowling Green actually did. And then they were blown out by Ohio the week before. Their only win coming into this week was against Eastern Illinois. And look, they just did everything better. And, you know, from the right after Georgia Tech went up, you know, 14-0, it was all downhill from there. So we'll talk about that on both sides of the ball, kind of where the program could go, how the season could go. It's kind of up in the air at this point. You know, that it's 1 week before a bye week. They did some staff reshuffling yesterday, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and, you know, if that can make any bit of a difference. But you know, the game couldn't have started off any better. You know, just getting into the game now, and look, first play of the game from Christian Leary, probably had his best kick return of the season. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster on that end, but he came out, had a good kick return, and then Eric Singleton, deep shot, 53 yards, touchdown. Defense comes out on the field. They had I think it was a horse collar penalty on Paul Moala on a third down, or a second or third down. Kept that drive alive. Tech was able to get off the field. 5 plays, 70 yards. Haynes King finds Christian Leary. And everything looked like they were going to come out and do exactly what they should do, which was dominate what I thought was an inferior opponent. And then the rest of the game just played out in an absolutely different way. Bowling Green wound up scoring 38 unanswered, and it started on the very next drive. They go 10 plays, 75 yards in 5 minutes. And the biggest thing was early down success. Like, Bowling Green didn't have it. Like, Tech did a somewhat decent job early on of not letting them get going on first or second down. It was just the third downs, and even the third and longs. Like, if you'd have told me Bowling Green was 10 of 17 on third downs coming into this game, like, I thought you were crazy. Like, this was a team that could not score the ball or do anything particularly well. They were 119th in the country in turnover. They were -5 in the turnover margin coming into this game. They couldn't protect the quarterback. And, yeah, Tech did get a couple sacks, but it didn't make a difference. And the defense, after those first 2 drives, it was just all downhill. And it was the same issues that we've seen is what's so frustrating. Like, even in the win against Wake Forest, they got some runs. They broke some runs loose, and like they ran it 52 times. They weren't all that effective. I think they averaged under 5 yards a carry, close to 4. But they did it effectively. Ole Miss, obviously, they ran wild. Louisville ran wild. Even South Carolina State did some good things. The tackling and the linebacker play, it was terrible. I don't, not trying to be derogatory about anybody, but that's just the way it was. When Bowling Green comes in here and you have a running back go for 152 yards, averaging over 5 yards a carry, and just like he was making people like just bounce off of him, and it was crazy to see. And Bowling Green goes down there, gets within a score. You're thinking, all right, well, defense will make adjustments. They can't stop the offense. The offense did what it has done in pretty much every game this season, and it did its disappearing act. And this is when you are relying on your offense to be the strongest part of your team and to be able to score points and keep you in games, because I think that is generally the plan for them going into games is our offense has to be able to score, because it's hard to stop anybody just all the time. But with the defense that Georgia Tech has shown they've had, like, you're not going to get a ton of stops almost no matter who you play. So they need to be able to outscore a lot of teams. And they go into these disappearing acts where I think they immediately went 3 and out. Bowling Green goes and gets a field goal. They were fortunate too. Like they could have scored a touchdown on that drive. And then Tech goes 5 plays and out. Like you had 8 plays after that second touchdown drive where you didn't do anything. So it was, some of it is just a inability. They have not been able to run the ball well the past few games. Even against Wake Forest, they definitely didn't do it in this game. And I have to give a shout out to Bowling Green quarterback Connor Bazelak. He came in 21 of 32, over 260 yards, threw a touchdown. And when I went and was watching their tape before the game, the thing that stood out is he was getting pressured immediately and just was panicking back there. And that was the reason Bowling Green was turning it over so much. And that was after watching the game against Wake Forest. I thought, okay, well, if they can do this to Wake Forest, Bowling Green has a lower quality of an offensive line. Georgia Tech can create pressure. They should be able to force turnovers. I said it in the preview video last week. Like, if you get pressure on him, he's going to turn the ball over because he panics. Like, he's just not – his pocket presence isn't good. He doesn't have a great feel for it. And then he comes down there and makes me look like an idiot, which isn't the hardest thing to do. But, like, he was just dealing all game. He didn't hit too many super explosive plays, but he had all the time in the world in the pocket for the most part and just found his spots. Like, the middle of the field was generally open. And, just watching it, it was just – it was an indictment of coaching on that level, I've made no bones about it. Coming into the season before the Louisville game, when I was doing the season preview, I sit here and said on this podcast, the pass rush worried me. The talent level at linebacker worried me. I thought the secondary had talent to be pretty good, but the front 7 scared me. Now, did I think it was going to be this bad? No. It's just they're ineffective at pretty much every level right now, and it's gonna have to change, because like this, if Bowling Green is doing this, then Saturday this is a nightmare matchup for Georgia Tech. I'll get into more of a Miami preview in a little bit, just talking a bit, but this is a nightmare matchup. But just the inability to tackle has been a problem. The inability to get pressure, and that allowed Bazelak to do his thing. You had the tremendous touchdown catch on 3rd or 4th down, I believe. And you go into halftime trailing, and it seemed like those first 2 drives were a distant memory. And, at least at halftime, I was thinking, all right, maybe they came in and overlooked them. The first 2 drives made it even more so. Like, okay, we're up on these guys. We got it in the bag. We got Miami next week in a big game. It's going to be in prime time and on South Beach. Like, it's a big stage. And you're thinking, all right, just make the halftime adjustments, do what they need, get the offense clicking. Georgia Tech has been a very poor second half team all season long. The Louisville game was the start of it. South Carolina State doesn't really count. Like, that's an extremely overmatched opponent, even against Georgia Tech. You had Ole Miss. It was 10-3 at halftime. Ole Miss comes out and hangs 38 in the second half. Some of that was just bad defense. Like it was bad defense tackling, giving up explosive plays through the air. And then you're up 20-3 against Wake Forest. I believe it was 20-3 at halftime. And then Wake Forest was coming back to try to win that game. You know, and in the second half, I'm thinking, all right, they have to buck the trend here, get back on track, get it. Like at that point, you go from, all right, we want to dominate, blow them out, show that, hey, maybe we can compete and upset Miami, to, all right, let's just get a win. I don't care if it's 2 points, 3 points, 7 points. Just get out of here with a win. It's better than a loss. And no matter who you're playing, what the score is, like you want to win the game at that point. And it like second half could not have gone worse. Like they started off in the third quarter. Bowling Green gets the ball to start out. They go 7 plays, 75 yards, and 327 touchdown. Bazelak ran it in, and like the most important drive of the game, Tech does a pretty good job of getting down there. He had the pass interference penalty. Dominic Blaylock, who did have a pretty good game. I wrote the good and the bad, the ugly, my weekly column I put out after the game. The two brightest spots for Georgia Tech in this loss, and you can argue if they're bright spots or just, there might not be any bright spots, but I thought Dominic Blaylock had his best game as a Yellow Jacket. And again, Eric Singleton played really well. We'll get to more of that later, but just, talking about Blaylock had a big second half. Maybe he can build off of it. I don't know. Maybe it was just garbage time and Bowling Green was playing super soft and trying not to allow any big plays. I think that was probably part of it. They get down to the 14-yard line, and this is a frustrating part. Like just watching it as a neutral observer, as a reporter, you're down 10 points. I'm not a big fan of calling timeouts in the third quarter because you need those, especially when you're trailing by 10 points. They're going to run a fourth down play. Key burns a timeout. I said I didn't like that decision. I think you need to have something lined up. You cannot be burning timeouts down 10 to anybody. And then line up and run a awful quarterback sneak. Look, he said after the game, if we can't get a yard against them, if you can't get a yard, you don't deserve to win the football game. I get that. It was poorly executed. I thought game management was poor. It was really poor, and it was just, look, it's first time being a head coach. He's had some bad game management going back to last year, even in some wins. I thought there were times against North Carolina and Pitt where he mismanaged the clock or some game situations, and I thought he did right there. I thought you have to come up with a better scenario than that. And I get you should be able to quarterback sneak on Bowling Green. It was horribly executed. And then that's just when any hopes of a comeback really started fading, because what happens? Bowling Green, 10 plays, 86 yards, took 5 more minutes off the clock. They had a 3rd and 16, and Connor Bazelak ran for a first down. It was, again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, Georgia Tech did a somewhat decent job on 1st and 2nd down, forcing them into 3rd and longs. But on that right there, if you force a punt, you get the ball back probably in decent field position, and then you're possibly able to score. 3rd and 16, a quarterback that's not even a good running quarterback. Like this is, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards Bazelak or anything. Running is not his strength. Like it's not. And allowing him to get that 3rd and 16 it was inexcusable. Every part. You had that. They do a pretty good job on 1st and 2nd down following that, and then you had a holding penalty on Omar Daniels. I didn't love that. Like there were some questionable calls, but that don't get me wrong, that is not the reason at all Tech lost this game. But I thought that was one I wrote down. That was like I don't know about that one, but you go back, Clayton Powell-Lee got injured on this drive as well. They marched it down, got 2nd and goal. Their running back ran it in for a touchdown. And at that point, it was 31-14. And it just kept going downhill. The very next drive, Haynes King had probably his worst throw of the season for the pick 6. And pretty much from there on, I don't like they did come back and get it. They scored 27. They were able to put up some passing stats. A lot of that was just garbage time at that point. Like, you know, Bowling Green would have really had to screw up to lose that game. And right after that pick six, like that, there was no hope. Like that it was 24 points with about towards the end of the third quarter is just too big of a hill to climb up, and it was embarrassing. Like look, I've only been covering the team for a couple of years. I've as a neutral observer, I remember them losing to the Citadel. I remember the loss to Northern Illinois. I remember scoring only 2 points against Temple. I don't know. It's probably out of my range as somebody that hasn't been here or covering this team quite so long to say whether any of those losses is worse than the other. And I don't know that that's a conversation any fan wants to have. Like, we don't want to sit around. They don't want to sit around and discuss the losses. That's bad. It's to be third. Like, you can look at the advanced stats charts over on GameOnPaper.com. They do a great job of explaining of showing advanced stats. Bowling Green, 12% explosive play rate, 86th percentile in the country. Georgia Tech, 5%. And think about that for a minute. Tech had explosive plays on the first 2 drives, looked really good, and then they couldn't do anything the rest of the game. That they haven't been able to adjust. That falls on the coaching staff. Defensive run stuff rate, Georgia Tech, 22%. That's an awful mark. Third down success rate, 27% in the 14th percentile. Terrible. It was just bad all around. The run defense, the tackling, the third down defense, being unable to pressure Basilak, being able to not force any turnovers against one of the most turnover-prone teams in the country, and then the fact that they weren't able to run the ball. They had to throw the ball like 37 times because they couldn't run the ball on Bowling Green. It's the offensive line has made strides this year. I don't think anybody would mistake them for being as poor as the past couple of years. But the run blocking is just not very. It hasn't been very effective. Going back 2 straight games, for the first few weeks, they ran the ball pretty effectively. But if you take out South Carolina State, which is just an overmatched opponent, they haven't ran the ball well really all year. They've had to rely on Haynes King a lot, and he carried the ball the most times this game. I think he had 10 carries. Now, of course, not all those are designed runs or anything. He had to scramble a little bit, but look, it was just offensively they couldn't create anything pretty much after those first 2 drives. That was I thought he was pretty honest about it. Like that, those 2 drives were an anomaly in the game. They had nothing like that the rest of the game until Bowling Green's basically in prevent defense being like, all right, we'll give you the short dink and dunk stuff. You're just not going to be able to beat us over the top like Singleton did. And like they had some catch and run stuff there on those first couple drives. But the defense is I don't really want to talk about it anymore. Like there's nothing good to come out of that game. The defensive line played pretty poorly. Linebackers played pretty poorly. Secondary was not great. There were still penalties. I didn't think they played awful, but some of the passing yards given up is a result of not being able to pressure and create havoc. So this is it's a setback because you're looking just kind of going big picture. A bowl game is probably out of reach at this point. I will never it's college football. Anything can happen on any given Saturday. We've seen upsets pretty much every week. But now you're talking, even if you get winnable games against Boston College and Virginia and Syracuse, that gets you to 5. All right, now you have to either beat Miami, North Carolina, Clemson, or Georgia. Based on what you just saw on Saturday and what even in their wins, they haven't, even in their wins and close losses, that there's been some alarming things to see. What gives you any faith that they're going to win any of those games? Miami runs the ball extremely well. That is a team. Mario Cristobal wants to run the ball well, and they're going to come out and do just that. Their offense is playing very well. Their quarterback is playing just as good as any in the ACC and one of the best in the country. I know they've only played one really competent team in Texas A&M, you take out some special teams mistakes in that game, Miami smoked Texas A&M. So I think this is a nightmare matchup for them personally. Miami is also very athletic on the defensive front. It's going to be a very tough game to win. Um, you know, North Carolina. The only thing I can say positively is Georgia Tech's had their number the past couple years. They've done pretty well. Drake May was largely ineffective last year. The couple years ago when Jeff Sims had a big game, when Sam Howell was a starting quarterback at Carolina, it's in Atlanta. That's all I got for you there. Clemson and Georgia, like Clemson, I know they've lost 2 games, but those were 2 fluky losses, if you ask me. Like they very easily could have won both those games. They looked dominant against Syracuse on Saturday. It's in Death Valley. That is a major uphill battle to climb. Georgia, I don't look. It's a rivalry game. Tech could get up for it. They played them close last year. Georgia's not as good as they've been the past couple of years. Again, all you're doing is clinging to hope that Georgia screws it up and gives it to Tech. To me, like that's you're hoping if they already have a spot in the SEC championship game, they've already got it clinched and are looking ahead and just completely disrespect Georgia Tech. The thing is, I can tell you that's not going to happen. If you hear players talk and you hear their coaches talk, this game, it may not seem like a rivalry to a lot of Georgia fans, and it just may seem like a rollover for them. It means a lot to Kirby Smart. He loves beating down Georgia Tech, so they're going to come out ready for that. And I'm not going to sit here and be the doom and gloom guy and just hopes over, don't show up, don't do anything, just forget this season ever happened, just moving on to next year already. Like maybe something can happen. This is a big moment for Brent Key in terms of how the future could go. There is a scenario in which maybe they can finish 5-7, which, I know it's not what anybody wanted, but if I told you that at the beginning of the year, I do think there would have been some level of, okay, it's a really hard schedule. It's his first year, new coordinators, all that. Like we can, as long as you're not going 3-9 or 2-10, like we can live with that. A scenario of 2-10 and 3-9 is not off the table. That's just how badly they played Saturday against a team that is not very good and a team that I don't know that they're going to go to a bowl game or even compete in the MAC. I mean, I looked at the odds yesterday. Bowling Green's an 11-point dog this weekend in conference play. The MAC is, I think Conference USA is probably worse, but the MAC is one of the worst conferences in the country. So that it's just an indictment of maybe it was just a poor performance. Maybe it's just as simple as that. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. I think this team is probably worse than even I envisioned it, and I had them finishing 6-6. I was on the kind of the middle road. I wasn't overly optimistic, but I wasn't. I text 3-9. That's what they've been past 4 or 5 years. That's what they're going to be for the future. That wasn't me going into the season, but I'm interested to see how they respond Saturday. Look, I don't think they're going to win the game Saturday, but I do want to see what kind of fight they come out with, because I'm sure everybody has seen the post game, and Paul Moala, who's been a starter at linebacker this year, transferred in, said they overlooked Bowling Green and that they took them for granted, and that's not good. And I know he hasn't been here the past few years. He hasn't experienced some of the losses and what the program's gone through. But you're 2-2. Like you shouldn't be overlooking anybody like that. That's something that mentality has to change, and that's on the coaching staff. That there's no other way to put that. That is on the coaching staff to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen, because you're not talented enough to overlook anybody. You're not. And I don't care if you're playing Bowling Green. I don't care if UMass came to Atlanta next week. You're not talented enough and you're not good enough to overlook anybody. Georgia, Texas, Florida State, they shouldn't be overlooking anybody. But when Florida State overlooks somebody like they did with Boston College, they're talented enough to correct the mistakes and win in the game. If Tech has the things happen like happened on Saturday, they're not coming back to beat anybody. And when you overlook an opponent, it just says a lot about that they have a lot of stuff to get fixed. And Maybe it can. Look, I'm not. I think it's too early in the season. I think you have to. I know patience is not everybody's thing today. I think you have to see what the product looks like the rest of the year before you judge it fully. It obviously doesn't look good now. I'm not making excuses. It doesn't look very good right now. How they come out and respond Saturday is going to be interesting because on paper, I've said it a couple times already, and I'm repeating myself. I know, but this is a nightmare matchup. Miami runs the ball very well, very athletic up front. They could very easily come out and overwhelm Tech if they're focused. It maybe Tech has some things in the bag, and I guess that's as good a time as any to transition into the coaching changes, I guess. Like, I don't want to like say coaching changes because it makes it sound like there were some wholesale changes made. I think it was something that had to be done because I don't think Tech is in a position to be firing anybody mid-season. I didn't expect Andrew Thacker to get fired. I didn't know if I expected this either. I just, I asked Brent Key after the game Saturday how much confidence he had in his defensive staff, and of course, he's not going to come out and say publicly that he wasn't confident in them, but he said that they were. He's confident in them as everybody else on the rest of the staff. One day later, Andrew Thacker's coaching safeties and is no longer the defensive coordinator. Kevin Scher is now defensive coordinator. Like I said, I tweeted out yesterday. I personally, I don't know that it makes that much of a difference because he's been the co-defensive coordinator. He's been the linebackers coach. Not being disrespectful, but the linebackers have been probably the weakest part of the defense. They haven't. Some of it is a talent issue. Some of it is probably a coaching issue as well. Like that, when you lose to Bowling Green and you're down by 24 points, there's really no good to come from it, and you have to question everything that's going on there right now. That's just the reality of it, and maybe it does make a change. Maybe Thacker I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't working, and they needed a new voice. He's been around in the SEC. He's been at Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. He has coached in the NFL before. I think he definitely has a resume, and I don't know that he's a terrible coach. I just don't know if that's all of a sudden going to fix the defense. The only way we can judge is by letting it play out. And like I said, Saturday is a big challenge. The Miami arguably has the best offensive line, in my opinion, in the ACC. They have a coach that loves running the football and that wants to be physical. And Miami has played up to this point like they have something to prove this year. They were a horrible team last year, and they look like they have a chip on their shoulder and something to prove. Maybe you catch them looking ahead to a big primetime game against North Carolina next week, and they also have Clemson coming up. It's possible. But just my honest opinion is I don't know how much change this is going to make. How much difference it's going to make. I think the issues are probably deeper than that, and all you can do is hope for the best. Look, all you can do is as a fan, hope for the best, see how it plays out, and we'll find out on Saturday. But yeah, this was I've been trying to collect my thoughts over the weekend just to present it and try to be as level-headed as possible and not try to be too overreactionary, but at the end of the day, there's no way to cut this up and serve it nicely. This was a terrible loss. It was embarrassing, and it was I think it's a setback for the program. Look, they need to be they got to get to the point where they're winning those games, and it's not a second thought. Like they have to come out, take care of their business, and you play a tough schedule already. You have to come out and win these games and take care of your business and show, hey, we may not be ready to win 8-9 games and possibly contend for a spot in the ACC title, but hey, we're an improved team that can take care of their business against overmatched opponents. And then, however the games against Miami, Georgia, Clemson play out, they play out that way. But I was never going to judge Georgia Tech based on how they played in those games anyway. Not saying if they played poorly, I wasn't going to criticize them, But I didn't come into the season being like, man, if they can't compete with Miami or Georgia, what's it all about? These are the kind of games and how they play that you want to judge where they are in year one of a program. And I don't care that it's year one. I personally, I don't know that fans should care that it's year one. You shouldn't lose to a 1-3 Bowling Green team and be down by 24 points. That he should be given time to correct it and try to make the changes. And that's why I'm saying let's see how they come out and respond on Saturday. They should be given that, and that's what we'll find out. But like I was saying, it was hard to coherently put it all together and just lay it out, try to be as level headed as possible, and not get too reactionary or hot takey or anything like that. But ugly weekend for Georgia Tech. We'll see what they have against Miami. I will be previewing the game later this week. Make sure you turn those notification bell, hit that notification bell on YouTube to know when that content is up. Like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube, greatly appreciate it. If you're listening on podcast, I greatly appreciate that as well. Love making this content for you guys. I know it's not easy. That this weekend didn't make anything better, but if you're checking out the website over at All Yellow Jackets, I greatly appreciate it. It means a lot to me, and I thank anybody that does it. But that's going to do it for me today. Like this video if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave a review on wherever you're listening on podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening. Would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for anybody that tuned in, and I will see you later this week to break down the game against Miami.